number 19. So imagine, Zukertort after the previous game, you must have been extremely upset, okay? You must have been extremely upset, and I forgot to change, of course, the game number. So let's go do that. We are doing now game number 19. So this is game number 19. Okay. All right, so let's see what happens. Okay, how many of you think this opening, what is being played today? If you are not from the moon, this is actually very topical and opening in right now. A lot of grandmasters are playing this opening right in the top tournaments today. Okay, previous month, before that, they go usually for the Carlsbad, but this is pretty topical. Yes, Pavel, actually that's the second series that I want to do. I want to focus on specific players and just make a study of those games, okay? So that's the second thing I want to do. Right, so I'll try to do that concurrently, okay? Because if we're gonna do the Steinitz and Zukertort historical match, then it makes sense to kind of look at their contemporaries and look at their specific styles and games also, okay? So I'll have to choose the days when to do this. So today I just want to finish the Zukertort versus Steinitz match, and today is what? Today is Friday, right? Tomorrow we have this tournament, I think. On Sunday we have the Fisher Chess Simul for the tournaments, and probably I'll do it on Wednesday because I kind of need a day to get some rest. So I'll probably do on Tuesday, and then I'll dig up the contemporaries of these guys, and we will go over some games, okay, live, I guess. All right, so Bishop E7. The Venerable Queen's Gambit decline. It's very ancient opening. The move C5 is actually also was rediscovered, but it was more played with the Bishop on F4. Okay, Bishop on F4, E3, and that allows like Knight F4, E4, B4, Bishop D3, and there was like a lot of games with modern grandmasters playing this line. But C5 not here, no. Usually, okay, the way it plays is usually like this. E3, Knight D7, and now you can play C5 or something, okay? And then Knight E4, take, yeah, and then Rook C1, yeah. Yeah, there've been lines, something like that. Or black plays here C6, and then bishop here, then B6, B4, A5, A3, and there is like bishop A6, okay? This is like very, very famous. It also similar to Nimzovich, some lines in Nimzo, okay? So these are famous things. Our guys, Zukertort and Steinitz, they're like ahead of their time by centuries, actually. It's kind of amazing. All right, C5, B6 immediately. And of course, white plays B4, but unfortunately it doesn't work. And yeah, so you had to take on B6, but then the whole concept is wrong and black takes over the center. That's not what you want to do with white. But yeah, if you have to take, then black takes like this. And there's C5, C4, B5 coming. And you just lost your major pawn for some side pawn. You don't want that. So B4 was the big idea. And he took here, which is a mistake, which lets go of the advantage. Of course, now we know that black has to play A5. A3, and then he has to play Knight E4 to use the fact that white is underdeveloped and immediately hit this guy. So take, Queen C1, for example. And the problem is for white is that after recaptures, black has another tempo, which is this, hitting this pawn. And if queen protects this, then the rook comes to b8 really fast, okay? and black is winning because white is just completely underdeveloped. Yeah. Okay, you kind of needed to see that, and he took, and white took with this pawn, which is absolutely wrong. He had to take with this pawn, of course, to prevent that pawn from being rammed with a5. After this, white is fine and is approximately equal. Probably black is still okay after 94. Take, rook c1. And the big question, how does black play this position? Yeah, probably has to go for e5. I would say that's the most logical thing to do. Knight c6, e3, and e5. Yeah, ASAP while white is not developed. So bishop e5, you can take, actually with the knight, thanks to this rook being placed here. Discover check, rook falls, so you have to recapture. Queen d4, and this looks extremely equal. I really like queen g5 move with the idea that you can't castle because of bishop h3, losing the exchange. So that means white has to do something, and that something is what? Interesting, yeah? No idea. Bishop c6, rook b8, this threat of check. Ah, but then you can castle because of bishop h3, then you have bishop d5 or queen d5. So rook d8, protecting, reinforcing the threat, and rook c2. The engine move, yeah, the engine move. With idea of f4, protecting this and protecting your second rank. Yeah. All right, but black is fine. That's what white should have played. Instead, he took with this d pawn. Yes, Pavel, you can ask me for the player for sure. In the Carlsbad, there is new idea. There's new ideas all the time, man. Yeah. Thanks for the subscribing, Mr. Vino. How are you? Yeah, I mean, this game like predates modern chess by 2 centuries, man. Of course. Yeah, dc5. Of course, you don't have to ask Steinitz for pawn undermining like this. Yeah, of course he plays it. The guy was absolutely brilliant for his time. Yeah, a5 and yeah, gotta play a3, and d4 is played actually. Very nice. Yeah, the other thing that the engine suggests is to play h6 first. Make sure this bishop is resolved, whether he stands here and completely leaves the dark squares here on the queen side, or he goes back somewhere and then he is in the way. Okay, so this was a slight maybe improvement, but Steinitz correctly immediately identifies this move as critical before white plays e3 and stabilizes. Okay, because you cannot take on d4. This rook will be unprotected, and if this knight moves, then there is like a lot of things coming. Yeah, so knight b5, knight c6. That's why Zukertort took on f6, but giving up the bishop is not good, and gf6 is actually first line. Yeah, it's incredible because normally you want to improve your bishop. This bishop is kind of bad here, but at the same time you give white a critical time to, you know, recapture this thing and then play g3, bishop something. So gf6 first line. Also now e5 and potentially f5, and this bishop is yeah, doesn't care about this structure. Yeah, double pawns, doesn't care. So knight a4. Yeah, at this point white is just much worse, much worse. He is underdeveloped, king is stuck. However, he can play g3, bishop g2 in castle. If he can stabilize like this, then white is better. Yeah, and keeps all this stuff alive. The problem is this knight has no good square to go. If knight goes to b5, e5, then this guy is trapped. Yeah, c6 or something. And if you go to e4, then there's a lot of other things. Bishop b7, but also apparently queen d5 is very strong. And then grab, and grab, and queen b3. And if this pawn falls, then this whole bishop comes, and white is completely lost. So he plays knight a4, tries to close the file. Makes sense. However, a small inaccuracy, actually pretty huge inaccuracy. Yeah, the computer gives this move like double question mark. The idea is that black should have played this first and then e5 to keep this rook active, to prevent white from any like g3, bishop here, bishop g2, and then you have to find this move because you cannot take on d4. Yeah, double take and knight is lost. But if you move the knight here, then f5 and this beautiful center closes the bishop here, because pawn takes away the square, knight goes to c6, and black dominates this position. Okay, knight here, bishop like to g5, nice center, weaknesses, knight has no square. So this is strategically winning. White still has some chances though. Okay, instead, the idea being that this pin was critical. And yeah, and Zukertort immediately plays this move. This keeps this queen side now locked, and he has a chance to escape with the decent position if he managed to, you know, like e3, g3, bishop g2. If he castles, these pawns might be potentially very strong. Also, if white now plays c6, guys, can you see what happens? These two pawns will completely annihilate this knight and rook. Two tiny pawns will completely enclose knight and rook, get them out of the play. Okay, so bishop e6. So he's not scared of c6 here, and I'm not sure why. Okay, the ancient says that black just sacrifices the knight and plays like nothing matters because there's bishop b3. But, you know, I don't think it's so obvious, to be honest. Yeah, black has counterplay, that's for sure. But, you know, sacrificing a knight, you know, like this is not so easy. Yeah, the correct move was to play this. Yeah, although white now is still fine. He can still play something like this, and if he trades, white is done with the development, has nice pass pawn. Black is probably okay. He can put the rook on c7, block this pawn, and it's kind of incredible game actually. Yeah, again, another incredible game. He plays bishop e6, allows c6, but Zukertort decides to go with the development. Yeah, again, development in those days was paramount, pretty much. Yeah, development, at the cost of development, you sacrifice pieces and stuff, and of course Steinitz plays c6. Yeah, you don't get c6 anymore for white. And what's more important, if you play b6 now, this pawn is now gonna get hit. Yeah, so how do you hit it? Big question. Knight a6, rook c1, queen d5, pinning and attacking. What are you gonna do? Because queen c2 is not gonna work because of e4, right? So you have to sack the pawn on c5 for sure. So the big question becomes, what is this position? And I think after castling, yeah, the ancient says that black is better after e4, and you have to sacrifice the exchange here. Obviously, you know, black is better. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. How much better is the big question. Take here, bishop e4. And white has actually compensation here. Because king is too open, very powerful bishop, the pawn will be locked somewhere in c4, e3 to prevent rook d4. This pawn controls the b4 square. So white puts the bishop here, king here, rook here, queen c2, and consistently threatens the black king. So it's not going to be easy to convert this advantage. Okay, so very interesting way to play. But okay, he took on c6, and I mean, you kind of like leave yourself the square in b6 for your knight, but you don't have time. Yeah, I don't think you have time, because if you play bishop g2, there is rook b8, bishop b3 coming, maybe knight d2, bishop g2, rook b8, and this was the incorrect move. Yeah, but how to play? How do you play here? There are two moves for white to play in this position. Besides, you know, black can always play this e4 and f5. This is very strong, by the way, guys. This is very strong anti-bishop g2 stuff. You pretty much close this bishop, because the moment you play f3, you just play e3, f4 and lock the bishop, okay? And now black has huge advantage, central, etc. So now there is knight d2, which is the obvious move. Prevents bishop b3, opens the bishop, and that's one way to play. Again, the problem for white is that black still has this idea, close the bishop. And this knight on a4 is on the side. And the other idea, which is a little bit more devious, is to play knight here. And then your queen goes potentially hunting here. Protects the knight, yeah? And queen h6 with idea of knight f5. Or bishop e4. And this is kind of like tricky position, because you must play this, and white is still worse. But this was something that was very interesting, okay? Because black doesn't have time for f5, and if you try to play like this, then queen d3, and that's it. No more f5, double pawns, good square for the knights, and the engine actually suggests that black is no longer better at all, okay? So, knight h4, very tricky, strategically interesting move. All right, he played queen c1 with the idea of knight b6, same idea, yeah, but just a little bit inaccurate. And d3, again, very nicely, you know, Steinitz in his timely pawn push in the center moves, yeah. He identifies this pawn as weakness, and the king is still here underdeveloped. So e3, but then e4 and f5, and white is pretty much dead now, yeah, because bishop is locked. Very nice pawn. If you play something like f3, of course there is bishop g5, but apparently there is super strong knight d4 idea. You're threatening check, and if you take, queen d4, or even e3 first, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of crazy, yeah. See, black pawns here with a pair of bishops, open king. It's -5. Black is completely winning. Completely winning here. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Mr. Yanowski? Okay. All right. Well, we can always open Wikipedia and learn which country he represented, but I think it was UK. All right. We're doing chess here analysis, not the trivia, but thank you for pointing that out. All right, so let's see what happened. Castles. Rook e8. Not sure why this was played. 95 would look very reasonable. Yeah, I think 95 looks very reasonable. Also, bishop g5 doesn't look too shabby to stop f3. I mean, of course, you want to put the bishop here, but the knight here kind of protects all the entry squares. So, but 95 is a very human move, and then hit the knight and get rid of this pawn. But rook e8, okay, centralization. I mean, it's not worsening the position, so it's not bad. And f3, and wow, Steinitz, my god, first line, knight d4. Knight d4. So rook e8 was pretty much the move. He already knew that white is going to play f3. And he knew that after this move, if white takes knight, the rook will help the pawn to move. Yeah. Steinitz is a master psychologist. Yeah. He knew this was going to happen. e3. Beautifully played. And we got the same position. Black is dominating. So let's see what happens. Bishop f6. Powerful. You don't take the knight. Hit this guy first so the rook cannot protect it. Knight goes here. d2. Yeah. And bishop b3. So queen. And e2. Yeah. And white resigned because he loses the whole rook. All right, powerful stuff from Steinitz, utilizing inaccuracies by his opponent. Opponent went with b4 in the opening. It was very risky. Then he gave up the central pawn, which was a big mistake. After which black played powerfully until he allowed white to play c6 here. Actually, the engine says rook c1 is equal, because then b6 and this pawn is protected. The problem with g3 was that black played queen d5, knight d7, and you could not protect this pawn. But now the pawn is protected, and you can play e3. Okay, so black is not better. So g3 was actually a huge mistake, and this was the final mistake. Okay. He had to play b6 and not open the files for the bishops. All right, that was the game number 19. We have one more game to go. All right, and that will be finally the end of that match. So let me quickly again stop the stream and I'll be right back.